Hey, what's up everyone? Stone Coat Countertops back yet again with another jam-packed epoxy tutorial. But this time, you get to see how I install the biggest epoxy project that I've ever done, and I'm going to show you just how fun and simple it actually is to use Stone Coat Epoxy. So whether you want to save a lot of money and make your own high-end wall art, or you want to make some extra money and sell your own high-end wall art, I'm here to show you how to do that every step of the way. From mixing in our metallic colors, to intertwining these pieces all together, and even finishing it up with the most UV resistant clear coat you'll ever find. Join me on this mini journey and find out all the pro tips, tricks, and techniques in becoming a DIY pro. Stay tuned, enjoy the video. Hey, what's up everyone? Luke with Stone Coat Countertops. You get to tag along with me today, and I'm excited because I'm gonna make a 4-piece wall art set from scratch. As you can see, I'm in our wood shop. I got my MDF ready. I gotta make a couple cuts. They're gonna be 3x3s, 36 inches by 36 inches. So let's do this. So I'm gonna start off strong today with a pro tip. If you ever need to make any cuts on sheet goods but don't have a good enough straight edge, you really need to check out a straight cut saw guide. I didn't have mine yet, so I ended up cutting my boards by hand. But what would I have really liked was to be able to use our amazing saw guide. You can get perfect cuts every single time, and that would have made this process much easier. Subscribe! So if you want to find out what all the hype is about, check out that video on our channel or head to stonecoatcountertops.com. Two down, 2 to go. Okay, one more cut on each piece. Gotta cut a foot off so we can make these 3x3s. I feel like I sound like Darth Vader. Luke, I am yourself. 49 inches. Got an extra inch on here, so I need to take off 13, not 12. Measure twice, cut once. Okay, first success of the day. I got my boards cut into 4 pieces. Now it's time to router them. We like to router the edges of our projects. It gives it a nice professional look and helps the epoxy roll over perfectly. Okay guys, routering's done, now it's time to sand. I'm gonna use our random orbital sander with 220 grit sandpaper. What it's gonna do is help that epoxy flow over that edge. So I'm gonna make sure, sand the top, sand the edges, and then the next step, we're gonna put down our epoxy undercoat. When sanding, just simply make sure you get the entire surface and don't forget those edges. The edges of the MDF are really porous and rough, so make sure to sand those well to help that epoxy bond and roll over that edge perfectly. Oh, it feels nice. Wow. Once I finished the top, I flipped the pieces upside down and just sanded the bottom edges by hand to just help promote that epoxy to roll underneath and fully encapsulate our MDF. Okay, I got my boards cut, routed, and sanded. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Next step, epoxy undercoat. I'm gonna go with black color. They come in black and white. You got options, 2 of them, black and white. Website, stonecoat.com. Yes. I love using our epoxy undercoat because not only does a little go a long way, but also dries extremely fast. And with the epoxy undercoat, you want to make sure you do 2 coats. And remember, thin to win. Okay, once that first coat is dry, you're going to want to sand with 220. You don't need to sand real hard, just scuff it up a little bit and you'll be set. Once you're done sanding, just make sure to wipe the dust. And just in case you didn't know, we have hundreds of how-to videos on our channel, and we also have step-by-step written instructions on our website, stonecoatcountertops.com. So if you're interested in starting your next epoxy project, or maybe you're doing a kitchen remodel, or maybe you're even looking for a side hustle by making some cool artwork and selling it in your local area, we teach you every step of the way on how to become a DIY pro and how to knock any and all of our epoxy recipes out of the park. Okay, today's the big day. I got the set ready to pour my pieces. Since it takes up so much space, I'm gonna have to do it on the ground. So I laid down some plastic, got my paint pyramid set up. I got my board up here, ready to get sanded before we pour this epoxy. You wanna sand your board before you pour with 220, scuff it up. It's gonna help with the adhesion and get rid of any nibs and nubs that might've landed in the paint while it was drying. I've actually only done a couple of epoxy projects, and this is quite a big one. So I'm nervous, but I'm excited at the same time because I know it's gonna come out great regardless. Because I got this. So these boards are 3 foot by 3 foot each. I have them all butted together in one big square, so that makes it 6 by 6. So that's 36 square feet, and we want 3 ounces of epoxy per square foot. So that ends up being 108 ounces. There's 128 ounces in a 1 gallon kit. I'm using Art Coat today, by the way. I'm gonna mix up the entire kit. That's gonna leave us with some extra epoxy, but which is perfect because I plan on doing an exotic pour to kind of tie all of this together. And it's smart to have the little extra epoxy to work with for the exotic pour. And my buddy Mitch Quist is gonna help me with the mixing because there's a lot to mix. So let's get started. So this project is gonna go on a huge wall in my parents' house. So because this project is gonna be in direct sunlight, that's why I'm gonna use our Art Coat because it has great UV resistance. And like I said earlier, we're gonna mix up this entire batch. So let's start with part B first. I'm gonna go all the way up to 64 ounces and then follow up with part A. I'm gonna mix this for 2 minutes using a drill. One down. Good thing we have all of our step-by-step tutorials, or I would have no idea what I'm doing. Found on our website, stonecoatcountertops.com, or on our YouTube channel, or on our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Google. Okay, time to mix. Pro tip, hold your bucket when you're mixing or you will be wearing the epoxy, which I do not recommend.
And then you'll want to slow the drill down, scrape the bottom and the sides of the bucket to make sure you're getting all that epoxy mixed. And then lift off the bottom and full steam ahead.
Okay, now that I have my epoxy mixed up, I'll pour it out into a bunch of separate cups because I'm going to mix these with their colors individually.
So as you can see, I got some help. This is a lot of epoxy to mix up, so I need 4 hands instead of 2. Game time audible, I'm gonna put some white dye into this white metallic. Want it to be a little bit more prominent, so let's do it. Okay, moment of truth.
So with my project today, I actually got my inspiration on how to do this from our tropical storm recipe. In that video, we showed you how to move and meld epoxy around with a sponge, and so that's exactly what I'm going to do today. I'll just pour out my colors randomly and let the epoxy do its magic.
Okay, so that was our black metallic with that diamond dust. I'm gonna go ahead and do the silver next. Now for the primary color, blue with metallic.
Okay, another pro tip. While moving these colors around, I'm not mixing them together too much because I'd like for each color to stand out. So I'm just using my sponge to fill up all those empty voids.
Let's see if this works. Ha ha ha! Look at that.
Okay, now that I have my base color pretty much down, I'm going to tie all these pieces together using an accent color. I wanted it to pop, so I went with the yellow. When you're pouring out your colored epoxy, you're gonna notice that there's gonna be a decent amount of air bubbles in that epoxy. Don't worry, all you have to do is get some heat and pop those bubbles. Today I'm gonna use a torch and I'm gonna sweep over these pieces to get all those bubbles popped and move and meld the colors together. This technique that I'm doing right here is what we call an exotic pour. I'm gonna take all of our separate colors and some spray paints and mix them all back in together in one cup. This creates a bunch of cool natural looking effects. For when you pour that epoxy out onto the board, it'll give it a totally different look. Hey, did you know that thousands of people all across the country have started side businesses using Stone Coat Epoxy? They've learned how to turn their crafts into cash by refinishing countertops, tabletops, making epoxy art like I am in this video, creating beautiful live edge river tables, floors, showers, you name it. They've all realized the secret to making a successful business from your own home using Stone Coat Epoxy. Interested in doing the same? Then head over to Facebook, join our Stone Coat Countertops Insiders group where you can learn from our 60,000 members on how to turn your passion into profit. We'll see you there. You got this. What I did here was just took some spray painted the end of a yardstick, and I'm dragging that through the pieces, giving some more definition and contrast to the veins and certain areas that I like. I'm using black, white, and navy blue spray paint to get this done. Okay, next step. I want to move some of these veins that I added and some of the colors around a little bit better, so I'm going to use a heat gun. You can also use a hairdryer or your blowtorch, but I'm using a heat gun to move and meld some of these colors. And honestly, I just like moving the epoxy around with heat just because it looks really cool. What I'm doing here is I'm using our navy blue gloss spray paint, and I'm just spraying all the corners of this piece, kind of giving it a blue vignette. It seemed like it was going to be a cool idea in my head, and I think I like it. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment below. Now that the color coat is almost done, I'm going to go ahead and pull those pieces apart to let the epoxy flow over those edges.
Oh, that's sick. Heck yeah.
I'll use my gloved hand to make sure there's no dry spots. Oh man, look at those colors. I love all the different shades of blue. I love the white and the black and how it accents those yellow veins going through the pieces. I think what I'm gonna do now is I want some more silver in this project, so I'm gonna fog some silver spray paint and use my yardstick once again just to add in some extra definition, and then I think we'll be ready for the clear coat.
Okay, color coat's done. Time to let this harden up overnight, and then we're gonna do our clear coat. So I'm gonna get cleaned up, get ready for the clear coat tomorrow. It's gonna be the same product, art coat, 3 ounces per square foot, just no colors added. All right, we'll see you in about 18 to 24 hours, but for you, a couple seconds, watch. Boom, and just like that, it is the next day, and you are now a time traveler. Okay, so as you can see, I got my board set up, ready for a clear coat. Like I said, we're gonna be using our Stone Coat Art Coat. 1-to-1 ratio, 3 ounces per square foot. I have my boards ready. Now it's just time to sand them, and then we're gonna get going. I'm gonna go ahead and sand with 220 grit sandpaper, wipe the dust, and then we're ready to mix the epoxy. Now don't worry about the scratches that you're creating from sanding. When you pour that clear epoxy over it, it's gonna hide all of that and make these colors pop. Once you're done mixing the epoxy for about 2 minutes, you're gonna go ahead and pour that into the center of your piece. You'll want to use our 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch square notch trowel. And after you pour it into the center of the piece, you're gonna take that trowel, you're gonna mix up the epoxy one last time with the trowel in the center of your board prior to moving it around. Then when the epoxy is spread across your piece, you're gonna go ahead and slowly push the epoxy over the edge, making sure that it lays over nice and smooth. After you're done spreading the epoxy around with the trowel, you're going to take a chop brush and chop the board out. What this does is mix the epoxy one last time and helps to hide those trowel lines. And then when you're done chopping the surface with the brush, use long horizontal strokes on the edge to help that epoxy roll over. You're gonna notice that you created a lot of air bubbles in the epoxy. No need to worry. What you're gonna do is take your torch or a heat gun, whatever you have, and we're going to pop those bubbles with heat. Make sure to torch about 3 times or so.
Our epoxy has an extremely long open working time, so that means you don't need to be in a rush. All you have to do is follow these simple steps and you will get perfect, stress-free results every single time. So since I chose to use art coat for this project, I do not need to worry about the cure time of these pieces because it's going to be hung up on the wall and they're not going to be touched. However, if this were a countertop epoxy, you'd be able to use your kitchen with light use after just 3 days of curing. However, you won't get the full heat and scratch resistance of the epoxy until it's been cured for about 30 days. Okay folks, it is the next day and just as expected, the clear coat laid out like a sheet of glass. Check this out. Man, I love the depth and that glossy sheen that clear coat gave us. These pieces are looking phenomenal. Now it's just time to sand the drips. Now, if I were doing countertops in place, I wouldn't have let these drips harden overnight. What I would have done was come back a couple hours later and scrape those drips by hand, so then that way we wouldn't have to sand those drips off. I'm pumped with how these pieces came out, and it's time for the home stretch. I just have to sand these, and then I'm gonna hit the road to go install them. Okay, so since I have to flip my pieces over on their face to sand the drips off, I put down a foam board to protect that from scratching. And you might recognize this from our shower walls video and how we used foam as a substrate for our shower walls instead of something heavier. So if you wanna learn how we did that, check that video out, it's sick. Yeah, check out these drips. So like I was explaining earlier, if you're installing our epoxy on site and you're unable to sand the drips because of the dust, you can wipe the drips off about 3 to 4 hours later after you've poured. They'll gel up and they'll just scrape right off, and then no more drips will form after that because it's starting to solidify. But in this case, since I wanted to show you guys how to sand these off, if you haven't done that yet, you're gonna find out how to do it right now. I'm gonna be using our handy dandy grinder with a 50 grit metal sanding disc to get these drips off, and then we'll move to the next step. Okay, that was easy. I sanded the drips off. Now I'm gonna cut my mounting brackets. This is how I'm gonna hang these pieces on the wall. These brackets are crazy strong. They can hang up pretty much anything from headboards to mirrors, pictures, cabinets, or sample pieces, because that's what Mike does. He loves these brackets so much. He actually made his own version, and that's what we use to hang every single piece in our Stone Coat showroom. So drop a comment below and let me know if this bracket is something you'd be interested in. Okay, pro tip. So I'm not going to install the brackets just yet. I'm gonna wait to do that on site. Preferably I would do that right now because I'm already in the shop. But I don't know how they wanna put it actually on the wall. So when we figure that out, that's when I'll install the brackets. All right. Okay guys, it is install day. As you can see, I am on site and we have a huge wall for these wall pieces to go on. The ceiling is 20 foot tall, so I have some measuring to do. Let's do it. So in order to find out where I was gonna install these pieces on the wall, I had to find my center point. So I measured the total height and width of that wall and found center, and luckily enough, it did land right on a stud. Coming into this install, I knew I was gonna space my pieces out several inches from each other. So with that said, all I had to do was find the studs that I was gonna screw my brackets into. Most studs in a house are 16 on center, so I measured from my center point and then moved on to the next step. Okay, so I have the pieces mocked up. We're ready to mount them. I just need to put on the brackets. Installing the brackets on the back end of these pieces was extremely simple. All I did was pre-drill through that metal so I can screw into the back of these boards, and then I was ready to put them up on the wall. Okay, so I got the wall pieces up. I love how it turned out. Honestly, I was surprised I got them straight, but look at that, man. Yes. All I had to do was find my center point
found the studs, and then make sure everything was level, and it worked out like a dream. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for tagging along with me through this process, and until next time from Stone Coat Countertops, you got this. We'll see you on the next video.